Joe, a Los Angeles police officer, was forced to be reassigned to the 911 customer service section that afternoon due to a legal issue. On his first day of work as 911 customer service, Joe was extremely busy fielding numerous emergency calls from members of the public. Joe was really bored of the emergency calls that were ringing every minute, but he wasn't the only one who was experiencing this. All of his coworkers in the room were as well, and even his own boss was always getting calls at this time. Joe finally understood how challenging his job as a 911 operator was. In addition, Los Angeles is one of the American cities with the highest rates of crime. However, the issue is currently getting worse as a result of forest fires throughout the majority of the United States. It was impossible for anyone in the room to even have time to prepare some coffee or buy some sugar before heading back to work. A woman named Emily calls Joe in an emergency. Emily is crying and babbling something incomprehensible. Joe is about to hang up the phone since he is feeling odd, but then a man's voice can be heard, so that the kidnapper would not suspect Emily when she immediately feigned to call Joe by her son's name. Joe knew that Emily was currently providing him a code signaling that he was being held captive. Joe and Emily exchanged a coded message, and Joe advised Emily to answer his question cautiously. Joe was able to determine the characteristics of the kidnapper's white minibus while keeping track of Emily's location using the GPS signal from her cell phone. Joseph made a quick call for assistance. In the middle of the turmoil, the kidnapper tries to steal Emily's cell phone as he becomes suspicious. Joe advised Emily to maintain her composure and call him when she had the chance later. Joe requested that the access road be closed and that all white minibuses passing by the area be checked after the call finished, but the patrol officer closest to Emily's location declined since he was attending to the fire. He attempted to flee, along with other patrolling police, but it was not feasible to close the road in order to save one life. Afterwards, in order to aid the police in locating her, he instructed Joe to discover the car's license plate number. Through the police records, Joe next discovered Emily's home phone number and address. Abby, Emily's 5-year-old son, answered the phone in a panic when he was called. Joe was informed by Abby that earlier, his father Henry had arrived at the house brandishing a knife, coerced his mother into the car, and left Abby and his younger brother all by themselves. Oliver Abby added that he was currently dozing off in the restroom while listening to Evie's tale. As soon as Joe discovered information about Henry in police records, all of Henry's personal details, including his residence and license plate number, as well as his criminal history and multiple prison stints, appeared. Joe is certain that Emily is a victim of domestic violence and that Emily's husband is the kidnapper. He worries that he will annoy the other customer support representatives. After deciding to change rooms, Joe sought to contact his superiors at the police station for assistance with Emily's case, but his employer became irate and instructed him to prioritize resolving his own case above those of others. Joe's supervisors have asked every member of the Los Angeles police force to assist in giving false testimony in the trial of his case, which will be held tomorrow, so that Joe may avoid prosecution and the police department's reputation can be preserved. In accordance with the SOP, he also mandated that Joe serve his sentence as 911 customer service. It's not necessary to become overly concerned with other people's issues. Joe will be able to resume his duties as a field police officer more swiftly after serving his term. As soon as Joe heard his supervisor speak, recollections of his case from a few months prior started to take over. He immediately gave his wife a call. Joseph urged his wife to be on time in accordance with the trial schedule tomorrow in order to help obtain false testimony during that call. Although Joe's wife didn't really want to get involved in this situation, she felt bad for him because he kept asking for her assistance on a daily basis. She also pledged to appear in court the following day. Joe sighed a sigh of relief and went back to waiting for Emily's call. Even though his supervisor bans him from becoming a police officer, he doesn't care. Joe cannot disregard the individuals who need his help. He will continue to stop at nothing to assist Emily. Abby called Joe shortly after and informed him that the police had just arrived. Then Joe instructed Abby to give the police his phone. Even though Joe was completely uninjured, The police started to sound terrified when they noticed that his hands were covered with blood. After Joseph was inspected, the police terror became more audible after hearing that Joe had panicked. Oliver was discovered by the police in the bathroom, lying motionless and covered in blood. His stomach had been torn open in the course of the talk. The phone abruptly died. Joe, repressing his rage, was certain that Henry must be responsible for this. On the call, Joe made Henry's number his own. Joe, who identified himself as a police officer, asserted that he was previously aware of all of Henry's abuse of his wife and children. Henry, who felt hemmed in, was unable to speak. He kept sobbing out of dread. Joe has had enough of feeling. Joe claimed that a brutal killer like Henry would not be deterred by a prison sentence alone. He vowed to have Henry put to death if he was discovered later. When I finished speaking, the call was cut off. Rick, Joe's co-worker at the police station, was then called for assistance, and laughter could be heard from a distance. Joe suspected Rick was intoxicated at the bar. Joe reprimanded Rick for abusing alcohol and for getting ready for his testimony the following day. Rick fears that his lies may be discovered, just like Joe's wife did previously, but if Joe is not his buddy, he does not want to give a fake account of events to the judge. Joe assured Rick that everything would be alright. Joe vowed he wouldn't cause any more difficulty once the case was over. Joe informs Rick about Emily once he has calmed down and asks him to visit Henry's flat to hunt for hints about Emily's whereabouts while he is away. Unexpectedly, Emily picked up the phone. Joseph inquired about Emily's condition. Emily added that she was seated next to Henry in the front seat of the vehicle. Joe inquired once more about the car's speed. Since Emily has little automotive knowledge, she can only respond that the automobile is moving so quickly that it frightens her in the middle of the talk. When he attempted to take Emily's phone from her hand, Henry's voice was agitated. After taking a look at the situation in the car, Emily said that Henry was not wearing a seatbelt when Joe questioned again. Joe then commanded Emily to swiftly fasten her seatbelt and slam on the brakes. After that, the phone was cut off. Joe could only pray that Emily would update him soon. He called the patrol police as he waited to find out where Emily's cell phone's most recent GPS point was. After waiting for several minutes, Emily contacted him again and told him that Joe's plan had failed since she had escaped earlier and Henry had been able to find her, and that she was now imprisoned in the back of the car. Joe also soothes Emily by revealing his backup strategy. After looking around, Joe inquired as to what the challenging object was. Emily discovered a brick. Joe then instructed Emily to be prepared when the car stopped later and Henry opened the back door. So Emily had to use all of his might to strike Henry with the bricks before sprinting away from the scene. Emily began to stop sobbing gradually. Although Emily was only attempting to get the snake out of her second child, her entire tummy, chatting to Joe helped her feel as though her heart had calmed. Emily vented, since she didn't know why Henry was upset. Joe urged Emily to explain everything in as much detail as she could because he was starting to feel confused. Emily added that Oliver had been crying non-stop all day, as if he were trying to hold back a stomachache out of compassion for her son's suffering. Oliver ceased crying as soon as Emily made the decision to divide her stomach in half. Joe was silent as he realized how relieved Emily's heart was that her kid could now be pain-free. It turned out that his suspicions had been wrong, and then suddenly Henry heard the sound of someone opening the back door of the car where Emily was locked, and, as planned, Emily hit Henry on the head with a brick. The phone was disconnected again. Not long after, Rick called and said that he had found a clue. After searching Henry's house, Rick found a bill from a mental hospital in the name of Henry's wife, Emily. Joe was so shocked and trembling that he tried to call Henry, but when the phone was picked up, Henry was heard crying in pain because his head was covered in blood from the brick impact. Emily has fled far, Henry informs her. Joe was then told the truth by Henry, even though he knows they would say no because he lacks the funds to cover his previous debts. Henry wants to take Emily back to the mental hospital. Henry is still adamant about going there to defend his kids. Henry, on the other hand, still has feelings for Emily despite being divorced. Once the phone hung up, Henry was concerned that if the police learned about Emily's conduct, he would be detained. Joe believed that the entire incident was his fault because it could have been avoided if he hadn't assisted Emily in fleeing or meddled in other people's domestic matters. Soon after, Emily called him again and answered a series of inquiries from Joe while claiming to be on a flyover. As Millie noticed there was a lot of blood on her hands, she quickly became anxious. Suddenly, Emily was reminded of the harm she had caused to her own biological kid. She continuously declared that she didn't deserve to exist in this world any longer. While sobbing and lamenting her acts, Emily had been calmed down, but she was still sobbing uncontrollably. When Oliver went to heaven, Emily continued, "I want to leap under the flyover and follow him." Despite Emily's prior transgressions, Joe thinks that she still deserves to live, and this shattered his heart. Joe himself is the one who, if anyone, doesn't deserve to exist on this planet. Joe had killed people while sobbing, so he understood precisely how Emily felt. Joe detailed his transgressions for me, including finally told him Emily had been saved. Joe started crying with joy as soon as he heard the news and jumped in. A short while later, his employer arrived to inform him that Oliver, Emily's second kid, had been saved and was receiving medical attention at the hospital. Joseph could only sigh with relief before going to the restroom. Joe understood after this occurrence that Emily's situation was a mirror image of his own. He can readily give advice to others while secretly trying to cover up his transgressions and avoid taking accountability. Although Joe would have to spend time in gaol, lose his job, and damage the reputation of the police, he made the decision to dare to face the truth. Joe won't run again. Joe then got in touch with each witness separately and urged them to provide an honest account in court the next day.